If you've been listening to the podcast recently, you might have noticed that we've been talking a whole lot about resilience. Because it is my belief that if you're around long enough, eventually life will throw you a curveball. And your ability to engage with life's happenings with resilience, essentially with grit and grace, means everything in terms of how you make it to the other side. And so up to now, we've talked about many skills and practices and practical ways in which you can build resilience in your own life. But it's also instructive to see real world examples of how people have been resilient with their own challenges. My name is Dr. Adrienne Udeem. I'm a physician, author, and expert in medical weight loss and mind-body medicine. And I help high-achieving professionals like you understand the existential hungers that drive our reactivity, burnout, and self-sabotaging behaviors. And this is Health Bite, the podcast where we explore the essential nutrients that support your physical, mental, and emotional health and well-being. Each week, we will uncover one hidden hunger and explore evidence-based tools like nutrition, rest, mindset, and contemplative practices that help you regulate your stress response and redefine success without sacrificing your health, your relationships, or your personal health and well-being. And I can't think of anyone better than to bring this home for us as our guest in this week's podcast, Ginous. Ginous is an entrepreneur. She is the founder and owner of Nana Good Eats, a delicious Mediterranean restaurant in New York City. And I'm so glad to have you here with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. So glad to be here, Adrienne.
So we did some extensive work together in Resilient Minds. Your story of resilience began long before that work. And so I wonder if you can just start by sharing when you were really most or first tested in your life and how you had to cultivate that resilience in order to move forward.
It goes back a while, actually this year, 20 years this year. I guess even farther back, but that would be moving from my home country to this country in my teenage years. That's a whole set of challenges that I had to face as a teenager. And a lot of moving with family, unsettled life for a while, moving to a new country and all that. But the most challenging time was in my 30s when I was just married for about 6.5 years with 2 toddlers. And my husband was diagnosed with very serious form of leukemia. And it was a very, very challenging times that I was facing, and it was just hell for about 2.5 years. Unfortunately, we did lose the battle, and he passed away when he 39, I want to say. Yeah, so about 2.5 years was a huge struggle and challenging, raising 2 young children and going through that whole journey and finally losing my husband. After that, when you have toddlers and you lose a partner, there is no time to stay in bed and stay under the covers. You got to get up and you got to move on, do what you need to do. So I guess that would be the first real challenge to learn resilience in my life and go on. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we all face, unfortunately, loss, illness. It's inevitable. But for you to have faced that in your 30s with 2 young kids, really, and to your point, having to continue to care for these kids out of necessity, it sounds like you had to build that resilience. But I wonder, yes, you had to, so to speak, but did you have a sense in the moment that you were doing anything particular or leaning in or into any of natural strength at the time?
What stands out for me, remembering that time, was a sense of acceptance, just really tapping into, now I have the vocabulary somewhat to call it what it was, but some kind of an inner strength, I guess it is, to accept and move forward, but also purpose. It was like a purpose that my purpose were my children. My purpose was the several different projects, real estate projects he had left behind for me to complete. So that also helped, having a purpose, having goals, and all that helped tap into this inner strength to accept and move forward.
Yeah, when you talk about inner strength, awareness, and acceptance, I feel like so often, and I've been guilty of this personally, when we're faced with a challenge, we want to fight it. We want to change the reality. We don't want to face the reality. How did you find that ability for something that was really so unjust to have acceptance? Did you fight it? Did your acceptance come after a period of kind of friction between you and reality, or was that just something innate that you had?
No, naturally, I fought it. I believe I fought it for about almost 3 years, 2.5, 3 years. That's the thing with death. It's final. There's nothing to fight anymore. You're kind of pushed to the point that you gotta accept. There's no other option, right? So then what? Then the decision is, do I accept and with a positive attitude and move forward and not let it destroy you, right? Or do I let it destroy me or my life, and in this case my children's life? So it was kind of a sudden clarity that comes with that realization, and such an extreme reality, that you got to choose. And so it's that clarity is what helps see and therefore choose which path you want to take.
What I love about what you're saying is that I believe that we all have that inner wisdom that you speak of,
Yes.
that knowing, I think is how you stated it. We all have that inner wisdom. The ability to tap into that, I think, really requires a certain level of stillness. Acceptance requires a level of stillness, awareness, and intentionality. But it all kind of stems from that inner knowing. And so it's really lovely to hear you say that in something that is so trying and taxing.
Yes, it is. And as you said, we all have it, but we do forget, I think, at times. And it's practices that I've had the honor of having with you that helps bring it back. Because I believe back then it happened naturally, but it doesn't always happen naturally. Back then, I remember very specifically, I was driving back actually from my husband was in the hospital, and I was driving back by myself. It's weird for me to even describe it like this, but it really was a very clear moment of acceptance on this drive back by myself in the car and tapping into what you just described as this inner knowing. And it's a very peaceful, calm, I want to say almost unemotional, unattached place of accepting reality. And yes, it's there, but we forget to tap into that. And it's a beautiful place. If that we have to be reminded to go back to. And like you said, that stillness, that it doesn't have to be emotional, it doesn't have to be attachment, it doesn't have to be anything, because it's so powerful in and by itself. I don't know if it makes any sense, but it's experiences like that personally I've tapped into, have come out, and occasionally I do go into it. It's something that comes with more and more practice.
It does make sense because I think everyone who's listening can think about a time in which they experienced sudden clarity in the midst of struggle or distress. But you're right, in order to revisit that place, because it doesn't come all the time, we wish that we could always be in that place of serenity and clarity. We do need to cultivate it with practices. And I know that you've done a lot of work over the years. And then almost serendipitously, we came to doing the work together as you joined Resilient Minds in January of this year. And again, it's almost mind-blowing to recall that just before many of the participants who were on the West Coast had experienced the Palisades and Eaton fires, the fires that we experienced in Los Angeles. Just days before that, you, living on the East Coast in New York, had experienced a fire as well.
Yes, bizarre coincidence. And these are the incidences that really make you believe like everything happens for a reason, and how this work came into my life at exactly that time with exactly those participants. It was amazing. And yes, it was 2 days. There was a small fire in my residence, but it was very damaging. But it happened exactly 2 days before the LA fires. So yes, and another extremely challenging time, but I was fortunate to join this group, and it really, truly helped me at a very trying time.
You know, one of the beautiful things about Resilient Minds, one of the things that I personally appreciate as a facilitator is not just the skills that we'll talk about, but community building of like-minded individuals. And we don't recognize, I think, at times how similar we are to people who live thousands of miles away, have different cultural and maybe ethnic backgrounds, who have different walks of life, different professional backgrounds. I mean, in many ways, you were very different than many of the people who were in that group, but also very much the same, and also tied by this, again, bizarre coincidence but the sense of community and recognizing the universal thread that connects us all is therapeutic in a very profound way.
Yes, it is incredibly therapeutic too, because you also, in such a setting with a group, you're hearing other people verbalize what you're experiencing, and that by itself is like, I'm not alone in this. I'm not the only one going through this. And that by itself kind of just is very therapeutic, as you put it, and calming in a sense. And just knowing you're not the only one in the world going through the struggle. And it really helps. It really helps to know and to share that experience and go through this healing process together as well, using the tools and observing and sharing how the different experiences work.
I think what is inherent in experiencing trials and tribulations is that it can be inherently alienating. I think when we are in our thing, whatever that thing is, right? Whether it's catastrophic or even the small and seemingly trivial struggles that we go through, we feel so alone. It's by nature very isolating, right? And so one of the beautiful things of being in these groups is that it allows us to recognize again the truth that we are not alone, that common things are common, that regardless of who we are, we experience the same universal hungers, as I like to describe it.
That not only in personal life, but as a restaurant owner, as a female restaurant owner, isolation feels very real also in my work situation,
Professional life, yes.
my work situation, because it's very much as a and it's a common thing that a lot of women business owners in the restaurant world feel that we feel very isolated. Men kind of think there's a thing that they have connections, they can contact it, but you don't feel that. So in that sense as well, I've been able to use that in my workplace also, the tools that I got. But
I'm so glad that you brought that up, though, because I don't think it's exclusive to the restaurant world. And this is actually documented in the data and in research as well, that men they do better in terms of networking, taking time to cultivate relationships, work lunches, after hour drinks, golfing, or the likes. Whereas women don't really take that time. I think women, this is a generalization, but they tend to either be working or on their off time, they're caretaking, even if they're not parents. Many women find themselves in a position caring for parents or caring for siblings. women inherently tend to be more, in general, serving caretaking functions. And so there's not a lot of time left and not a lot of time allotted. I think there's also this lack of permission. It is true that women, and then women, not just women professionals, but particularly women who are entrepreneurial in their professions, even lawyers or doctors like me who have gone out on their own, it
Yeah.
tends to be an isolating experience. So thank you for bringing that up. What I wanted to ask you is that I actually was speaking to a patient earlier this week, just yesterday actually, who's interested in enrolling in Resilient Minds. But she actually was turned off by the idea of the group. She didn't want to talk about her stuff or share with the group. And that's actually something very common, right?
Yes.
Is that something that you could relate to, or can you speak to that in any way?
Many years ago, I had the opportunity to do an experiential workshop. It was right after I had lost my husband, and I was also very hesitant. I always say if it wasn't for my sister, whom I trusted 100%, I would have never joined an experiential group workshop like that. Now I'm here to tell you that it is a priceless experience, especially because of the group environment, because of what we just talked about. And even if you don't want to share, it's okay. You don't have to, but I encourage it. I always say everyone should do a group workshop because, in my opinion, I think it, as opposed to one-on-one work or therapy or whatever, it kind of forwards it because there's many people sharing a lot of different experiences that you find commonality in.
Yeah.
So even if you don't bring up something, someone else might say something that, oh my God, it applies to me, that I can relate to it, that it's like a light bulb that it might have not been on your radar to think about, but it opens up something. So in that sense, I think it's an opportunity not to be missed.
I love how the way you describe it is that it almost accelerates the aha moments to have
Yeah.
multiple people in the room because of that relatability or the commonality of our experiences. And I think it's one of those things that if we haven't done it, and I can understand, the old Adrian prior to having done this work, I can understand, particularly if you're in a professional space, there's a certain like persona that we want to uphold. I can understand that it's not within our comfort zone, but being able to push out of that comfort zone, there really are blessings on the other side.
But the reward is a tenfold. The reward is tenfold. That's all I can say.
And to your point, even if you don't share, but I have found that there's always participants who are, there are listeners, perhaps they're hesitant at first, but invariably, I've never had a cohort in which at the end, all participants were not actively engaging.
Because even if you're shy, it'll take sometimes someone else sharing something very vulnerable or intimate that may or may not feel comfortable to also share, Again, even if you don't want to, you don't have to. Hearing someone else be vulnerable or share helps.
It's like vulnerability begets vulnerability,
Yeah.
right?
And even if it doesn't, I want to say that even if it does, even if you don't want to, it will help internally. It will help within your own mind somehow, somewhere. It'll touch something that will have that aha moment for
Yeah.
you.
What I want to touch on now is the fact that unbeknownst to you, when you actually signed up, you ended up taking the Resilient Minds course during a time of significant trauma and calamity in your own life, right? So you had already signed on, and then literally days before our start, you had a catastrophic fire in your home that required you and your children to move out. And what's interesting about this work, as I initially learned it, it was actually intended to be done during times of trauma in places of trauma. And there's a lot of medical research where the basis of resilient minds, the mind body skills, have been taken to war zones in the Middle East, in Bosnia and Kosovo, or in times of significant trauma like post Parkland shooting, for example. They have used and utilized these skills in that very time when it was most acute. I bring this up because I think sometimes people, when they are in that really acute phase of something difficult, there is no bandwidth, or they think there's no time, there's no energy, there's no capacity for doing work, right? But in fact, this is what is when it is most intended, not that it can't be applicable to the smaller traumas in life or struggles. But even in that biggest, most intense times of people's lives, it has been shown and practiced to be effective. Do you feel like something about you happening to be in an acute traumatic time of your life made you more open, or how did it change your interaction and interfacing with these skills?
It was truly as if God-given that I did this work during that period, because when you're in the midst of such catastrophe or disaster or going through it, even you forget this proper breathing that relaxes you so that you are able to function normal, I want to say, or to the best of your ability, to the clarity you need to move forward and make decisions, etc., etc. So it's the most basic of things, breathing, and we think we're doing it, but it's not until you actually make it a conscious practice that you notice the effect it has on your body, on loosening up the tension you're carrying as a result of what you're going through or what you're in the midst of. You don't realize how tense your body is or how much tension physically, psychologically you're carrying with you until you actually sit down, give yourself that stillness, give yourself that time to do the conscious breathing, to do the many practices that you offer here. They do magic in their simplicity. There's no other way of explaining it, but we forget. We're either not conscious about it enough or we don't know about it enough, or even if you've done work, which I've done these practices, but you forget at times of huge trials like that, and you forget to. So it was a great, great time to do this with you because it allowed me to, again, calm the mind, the body, so that I can make the decisions that I needed to make at the time and with clarity and, more sensibly rather than out of panic and out of a foggy mind.
I want to highlight that point that you made in terms of the practices giving you clarity so that you could make decisions, in an aligned manner. Because a lot of times these practices are sold as stress reduction, which they are, or, calming, which they are. But I don't think that we recognize how much stress and tension and outside noise and busyness impact our ability to function at our highest capacity. And particularly, I think when you are a professional or a business owner, or, you've done something magnificent like bring a restaurant to life and make it a success, you're used to doing well, right? You're used to achieving and accomplishing. And so one forgets, or one does not recognize how taxing that stress can be and how much more optimal our decision-making capacity can be when we actually take the time to do this work. It's almost like, yes, it takes time. And that's one of the things that some of potential participants, will push back against. Oh, I don't have time to do it. Yes, it takes time. But I think it gives us back time multifold because we are so much more effective.
Exactly. The time it's like any other investment. You invest this in yourself and it pays back. And you think you don't have time, but when you're on go, 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 go with a cloudy mind, you're actually not as efficient as you could be if you take a moment and then be more efficient, be more productive with a clearer mind. So like any other investment, I always say that it's the return on your investment is huge. It's just not tangible as you would imagine, but in a different way. Because as a single mom and as a business owner who just had their life turned upside down as a result of the fire, yes, I'm used to multitasking and making decisions on the go, and no problem, I can do it. Just throw it at me, anything. But you really don't realize, you don't know what you don't know. And that's once you get that clarity, you're like, okay, I now understand. And that's the part we don't know is missing when we don't take the time to do the practice necessary. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really want to highlight, it's funny because, in our circles right now, many of us are, women in that perimenopausal time frame, just before, just after. And this isn't limited to the women. It's also, men are complaining of this brain fog, right? But for the women, we are blaming, maybe it's menopause, maybe it's, somebody mentioned this past week, maybe it was the COVID vaccine. Maybe it's actually long COVID, all of which may be true. But what we do know is that this constant heightened level of stress and physiologic response to that stress, which is, turning on the fight or flight, freeze or fawn, it literally turns off the cognitive part of our brain. It turns on the reactive part because reaction time matters when you're in an acute stress. Cognition, thinking about things diligently doesn't matter in acute stress. And I bring it up because I think it's important for us to recognize that our bodies were not created to function with chronic stress. And yet chronic stress is what we are all experiencing, whether you were affected by the fires or whether you're just reading the news every day.
Absolutely. It's true.
Yeah. So you mentioned breathing. I wonder if there's any other tool or technique that you found very useful, something that maybe people are not familiar with. We did creative, expressive drawing and expressive writing. We did shaking practices, guided visualization, a lot of different modalities, autogenic phrases, biofeedback, a lot of different modalities to give people various touch points. And I wonder if you had a favorite that stood above the rest.
A lot of favorites. Some were fun, some were like, aha. The shaking and dancing was amazing because it just brings you back to, I don't know, just letting go and not taking things seriously. And there was something about each of the practices, but one that was more challenging for me, I think, was the reflective writing, was the one that was a dialogue with the issue at hand.
Correct.
It pushed me a little bit to, beyond my comfort, I guess, but it was really revealing in what I got out of it, because like you said, it's not just one challenge. There's like 10 different challenges going on at the same time, of course. And so each one could be applied, each of the practices could be applied to another area of life or another issue at hand. I found the autogenic phrases.
Can you, before we talk about the autogenics, can
Yeah.
you, without going into the specifics, maybe describe a little bit about how expressive writing was revealing?
It was revealing in that it completely changed my perspective about a situation that was so much more clear and, how would I describe it, then not as personal as I thought it was. For that. It was a situation with someone that I had taken very personally. But when I did that practice, I realized, it was very like it opened it up in a way that I realized it's not so as personal as I thought it was. Very interesting.
What I love about that, and it's interesting because the writing practice has done that. I've heard that several times in the groups. What I love about that is that it is a way of getting to the truth through on your own. Like there are circumstances in which we are very dogmatic about our views and our beliefs. And if anyone else wants to guide us or advise us on it, particularly the person with whom we have the confrontation with, for example, we dig our heels further. It becomes impossible for us to see a different perspective at times. And what's beautiful about this is that it is your own doing. You are
Yes.
coming to a realization that is to your benefit of your own accord.
Absolutely. In a very surprising way, which was the nice part about it.
And so you were going to say the autogenic phrases.
I found it to be, I had never done any a practice like that before. Very relaxing.
And this, just for our listeners, is a form of relaxation practice that is, why am I blanking on the word, is essentially a suggestive practice. So utilizing phrases, suggestive phrasing in order to bring about a sense of ease and relaxation, but then that also engages the body. So it allows people to have interoception, which basically means that you are so receptive to the cues that are coming from your body. And I think for people who don't know about this work or the practice, it may sound like wooey, but the reality is that we think with our minds. We're very cognitive as humans, and particularly as humans who live in the West. But our nervous system engages information in many different ways below the neck, and not only cognitively at the level of the brain, but in the body. And so suggestive phrasing allows us to access that information just by way of description. So yes, go ahead.
I just remembered there was also the labeling of emotions. That was really helpful. That's a practice I use at work a lot because it obviously challenges come up at work and you easily can get angry or frustrated and reactive in that sense. But it really helps with distinguishing what it is exactly. Again, deciding how to handle it, like a knee-jerk reaction. Okay, recognizing how you're feeling about it and what's coming up, and then addressing it properly, as opposed to in the moment being reactive. So that was also very a great practice.
It all comes back to how we are navigating the information and noise that we're being bombarded with on the outside, and not allowing it to derail us, not only in our health and well-being and, quote, stress, but as you mentioned again, how we wish to engage with the outside world. And that impacts our relationships at home. It impacts relationships at work. It impacts how we work, how we build teams, right? There's so many ripple effects of doing this work for ourselves that ultimately, we can quote sell it as like a productivity hack, but really I think at the community level, at the relational level, it's so profound in terms of how we can change what is a very reactive world that we live in right now.
Yes, absolutely. It's all about relationships, whether at work or personal or at home or family or friends. It's all about what we do with it that affects everything. And like you said, it has an immense ripple effect. And then the inner guide meditation, which brings me back to to what we were talking about at the beginning, where it gave me the tools to be able to tap into that inner wisdom, you lose touch with and throughout challenges in life. So that was a great practice also, the inner guide meditation.
Yeah. And I also love that you brought that up, because I think in challenging times, or even when we have a question in our mind, professional question, or we're at this stage of like leveling up, we tend to look to the outside, coaches or therapists or guides, mentors, gurus, all of which are great, but there is this inherent wisdom, this inherent knowing. Each of us knows what our next step should be, the next best step in our own lives. If only we are, quiet enough and trusting enough to excavate that.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
I really loved hearing your perspective in so many different ways, so many facets of your life. So thank you for being so honest and open in your share. This has really been a lovely conversation.
Thank you, Adrian. I really enjoyed the workshop and I really encourage everyone to do it.
I wonder if you have any last thoughts or considerations, anything that you think would help people out there listening who want to build their own resilience. Any last words?
Dive in. It's simple and it works and it will positively affect you in all aspects of life.
Beautiful. Thank you again. I loved having you.
Thank you, Adrian. Me too.
And I thank you for joining me this week on Health Bite. So far, we've talked about regulating, shifting out of reactivity. Today, we talked about restoring, replenishing the body and brain, the body and mind with what it truly needs. And next week, we'll go just a little bit deeper. We'll talk about reframe. We'll explore how our thoughts, our expectations, how our stories, how these non-tangible things actually fuel our burnout, and how we can reshape them in a way that aligns with our values and our goals. If you want to start to contemplate these nutrients a little bit more deeply, you can head over to my website at dradrianudim.com. You can download the free fuel blueprint there. And last but not least, if you're ready to do this work more deeply, I'd love for you to join us in the next cohort of Resilient Minds. You can get more information on that at dradrianudim/resilient-minds. Until then, I'm Dr. Adrian Udim. This is your Health Bite. I'm wishing you a great week, mind, body, and soul.